Okay, I want to ask with start with one of my favorite questions. As a journalist, I know that every career has a story. So I'm curious, why are you a neuroscientist? Why are you so interested in this?
Oh, that's a nice question. I don't know. I was.
Didn't go very far.
I was always fascinated by the brain. I was very good in math. I could have been a mathematician, I suppose. I was training in math and so on, but I was more intrigued by the errors that we were making in mathematics. It's very frustrating when you realize that you got a bad grade because you made a stupid error somewhere. And so I was always very interested in the sort of meta level of asking myself, why am I making this error? Or why is this kid? I was teaching a little bit because I was good in math, so I was teaching young adolescents, and why don't they understand? I understand. What's wrong? So I developed this interest in the brain. Also, as a young mathematician, I was fascinated with AI already at the time. So that was like 40 years ago, I guess. I started to try to program computers to do intelligent things. I realized how hard it was. And I realized that there was a whole discipline of cognitive science, and then later neuroscience, that could help to get answers.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things. I think there are many teachers in the room. I love that your curiosity was spurred by teaching math and why don't they understand it. I think that's one of the hardest things is once you become an expert at something, to then understand what it's like to be a novice. And I think a lot of this reading stuff is mixed up in that problem, how difficult
That's
it is.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
In fact, the whole language idea came from psychology. It came from the very curves I showed you. There's this flat curve where there's no length effect, right? We recognize short words just as well as long words. That gave the impression that this is how you read. You just flash a word and you immediately recognize it. But there was no awareness that in order to get there, you have to get through these intermediate stages. Otherwise, you never get there at all. So I think what you are saying is very deep. There is a constant illusion that because I know it's easy, it shouldn't be difficult. We could go straight there. Why spend so much time losing time decoding, right? Where we could go straight to comprehension. Well, it doesn't work this way.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, I love the image of what it's like in first grade. Like there's nothing there, and then all that effort, and then it gets organized. I'm currently tutoring some kids, and they're in the middle of that. There's all that effort going on, and it's like nails on a chalkboard sometimes to listen to them, like sounding out those words. But you can see in those images, like you've got to go through that to get from point A to point C. You've got to go through that point B.
Yeah, and still we can help, right? We can facilitate this process. It's not true that you just have to struggle for a very long time. We can make this period much shorter by proper teaching methods and by also rehearsal and so on. So there's a lot more about the science of learning, which goes beyond reading, of course, but which is general. In my book on how we learn, I insist a lot on the role of daily practice and sleep. These are very essential ingredients. The brain consolidates the learning during sleep. So as a parent, you should take advantage of every day and every night, and even every siesta, how do you say, nap, every nap, right, is a way to consolidate the learning. In this way, you make it much easier.
I'm a big believer in the 20-minute afternoon nap, so things are getting consolidated right there. So I appreciate what you talked about in terms of what you're doing in France to try to connect this and all around the world to the world of education. And there's certainly a lot of discussion. That's why I think we have so many people here today about the so-called science of reading in American schools. And a lot of people are concerned about how their kids are being taught to read. So have you had a similar sort of debate? I think part of the problem here is there's been a tremendous amount of resistance. There's been a tremendous amount of dismissing of some of the basic scientific findings. Is it similar in France, and why?
Yes, there is quite a lot of resistance. It depends very much on who you meet, right? There are many teachers, when I give a talk like this, they are enthusiastic. they think they come to me and they say, why wasn't I taught this, in teacher training school? So there is that, but there's also a strong resistance. Very often is from the trainers, not from the teachers, but from the trainers of teachers who have been teaching for 20 years in a certain way, and suddenly they have to change. They have to accept that maybe it was not perfect what they were saying, and that's very difficult. And then there is purely ideological reaction. What has neuroscience got to do with it? These people want to reduce our kids to little machines. They are going to put electrodes in schools. You have all sorts of phantasms that are extraordinary, I think. And we're not thinking of scanning every child, but and I have children and grandchildren like everybody else, and I care very much about how quickly they learn and whether we can help them and so on. So. I think this is perhaps the hardest, is all of these phantasms that we have to dissipate, which are very, part of people's beliefs that we have to change. Yeah.
Sounds like it's exactly the same in France as it is here.
Yeah, we come together when we show results, I think. So when you show in a classroom, like with this Kalulu method, we go to classrooms, we convince teachers to try it, and when they see that every child is starting to read by January. And at the end of the year, there's maybe one child who is below 50 words per minute. Then they sort of realize, And we have many testimonies from teachers like that say, I thought it was completely normal for 5 kids out of 20 not to read at the end of first grade. And now we realize, no, it's not right at all. It shouldn't be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. So that's where we all come together, I think, with the sort of concrete evidence from the teachers themselves, because they are doing the teaching, right? I may have given the impression that the manual is doing the teaching. That's not true. The teacher is doing the teaching. The manual is only some support, right, for helping them to derive a proper progression, a structural progression. So maybe that's something that you have also here in the US. One source of opposition is a very deep belief in the teachers that they have to construct a curriculum. If I have not constructed my own curriculum day after day, I'm not a good teacher. And that's a strange thing, for me, a good teacher is one that has made the kid progress the best, to the most of their abilities, regardless of where the curriculum comes from. So we have these teachers in France who actually complain to have a lot of work because every week they have to create the materials for the next week. Well, they don't have to. In fact, it's very hard to design a good curriculum. It takes years of effort to put it together in a proper order, to try it, feedback. So they don't have to do that. But that's one of the strong beliefs that they have that is also propagated by teacher training schools, that you're not a good teacher if you don't design your own curriculum. That's another big belief that has to be changed, which is quite hard, I think.
I've got one more question, and then we're going to go to the audience. So I guess get your questions ready. I think what you described about what was going on in France is very similar to what's going on in the United States. And I think there was a little bit of an audible reaction in the room when you showed the testing that all kids in France are doing and the results that teachers are getting. And you told me in the green room, they're getting them like in real time. Like teachers are getting this information and
1 or 2 weeks after
they get it. So it's like progress monitoring for the nation. So I'm curious, since you're now working with educators and policymakers, it sounds like, to try to bring some of this into education, if you have any thoughts or advice for us in the United States in terms of policy. There's a lot of policy making going on right now. We have an even bigger country, and we sort of divide everything. Right. We don't do anything as an entire nation, really. Any thoughts?
Well, I don't know the local situation well enough. I've been reading that Mississippi, for instance, has been doing incredibly well lately. I hope it's true, but what I was reading was really amazingly positive. I'm also reading that New York is changing dramatically, and in this case, with changing teacher training, which is, one thing is that there is big money involved as well, and so you have to change that, right? That's very, very difficult. There are people who resist just because of the money involved. So I think that what I see in Mississippi and in New York, what I read from the New York Times, seems to be going in the right direction. Why can't you do that together for all states? I don't know.
Good question.